All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So you guys walked into the psychology of horror games. And if you had happened to see the Momocon event page for this panel, I posted a poll, just which one are your favorite horror games. And so out of those ones, those are the ones that I'll mostly be talking about. But if you didn't see that and you didn't vote, that's okay, because I'll mostly be talking about horror games in general. And at the end, I'll be sure to save time that if you guys want to ask about any questions, if I didn't bring up a favorite game of yours, by all means, I would love for that. With that said, I'm Heather Ness. I run this website called superpsych.com, where I talk about mostly superheroes, but also video games and various anime, and kind of talk about what's the psychology behind it. A lot of times, like, what are the motivations behind these characters? My background is in clinical psychology, so what that means is mostly like mental disorders and how to treat them. So that's really the lens when I'm watching different shows or horror games. What's going on here? How are they portraying it? Does this person have a diagnosis? Is that affecting their behavior? With the psychology of horror games, we are going to talk about various games, but what I'm super interested in with horror games is actually the fact that it has, it's not the psychology necessarily about different characters, but what's going on with you guys as players. What's your psychology as you're experiencing horror games? So, one thing, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, is so much conversation in the media with all of the various horrible mass shootings that we have. And there's all sorts of different debates about them, but one that keeps popping up is, are violent video games causing mass shootings?
Of course.
I got into an argument with CNN's Twitter about this. So, if you were to Google, as I did, effects of playing violent video games, there's over 1 million results, and they all kind of focus on, just here's the top ones, do violent video games make everyone violent? Is that the cause of people going in shooting wherever? These incidents will happen, they'll go back to the person's home, and they're like, oh my god, they have Call of Duty on the shelf. I think I also have Call of Duty on my shelf, so maybe watch out.
They probably also have, like,
so,
books.
One of the things that we'll talk about in this panel is kind of the argument against this, the science behind it. You might see on various websites, research shows violent video games do cause shootings. There's such a thing as bad research. We'll talk about the really good research. Another thing that kind of comes up with just the topic of horror in general that I've had with several people is, why would you watch horror movies or play horror games? It's so gruesome. You're watching people die. What is wrong with you? But my personal opinion is, if something is so popular and so many people engage in it, it can't necessarily be what we would call abnormal. That there's something wrong with, like, the vast population of the world. So, to me, that speaks to there must be something in us that maybe horror games or horror movies pull us to. One of the most influential people towards just the genre of horror in general, H.P. Lovecraft, said, no amount of rationalization, reform, or Freudian analysis can quite annul the thrill of the chimney corner whisper or the lonely wood. There is an actual physiological fixation of the old instincts in our nervous tissue, which would make them obscurely operative, even were the conscious mind to be purged of all sources of wonder. Let me translate that for you. What H.P. Lovecraft is getting at is he's saying it's not necessarily that there is some sort of deviant drive within us. If you know anything about Freud, if you ever had to take a Psych 1101 class, maybe from me, Freud wants to look at like the dark impulses of everybody. So he would show them these ink blot tests and be like, what do you see? And they would be like, a wolf. And he'd be like, oh, you want to have sex with your mother. So what H.P. Lovecraft is getting at is maybe when we play these video games and we like horror, it's not so much that there's this deep drive within us that is getting fulfilled, this horrible desire to do something awful, that's being fulfilled through horror. He's getting at that there is something inherent that happens when we experience something scary. And he gets at, and he said this around in the 1920s. He got at that there's something biological happening. We have a thrill, and it's kind of fun. So when you're like walking alone and it's dark, and you know that you're perfectly safe wherever you are, maybe it's out in your backyard somewhere, but like the shadows of the trees get kind of weird and it gets kind of spooky. You're scared, but it's also just kind of fun. And he gets at, we look for these things, we enjoy these thrills. Another thing that H.P. Lovecraft really got into was that he liked to talk about the unknown. Now the thing about H.P. Lovecraft was that he was incredibly racist. And I want to say, in my personal opinion, he was incredibly racist because other people who were not like him were the unknown. And so he had a fear of the unknown. We all fear the unknown, whether it's like, it's the darkness, what's in there, death, what happens. Now, in certain situations, it's really easy to make the unknown known. Get to know other people, read books, whatever. But some things are always just the unknown, and they're always going to intrigue us because we want to know. But the fact that we can't find answers to it kind of drives us nuts a little bit. It gives us this thrill. So we've created this horror genre and that a lot of times gets at the unknown, or the what if. What is in the dark? What if this happens after death? Just to help us explore these various possibilities, because it gives us a thrill, and it helps us satisfy this innate human desire to even think about the unknown. He got at this part about our nervous tissue. And so I'm really going to get into that with you guys. And I trimmed it down from my Psych 1101 class. In our brain, we have many parts. But in the outside part, we have 4 different areas. That's what's up here. And I'm not going to go through all of them because you guys don't need to know. But the first one is called the frontal lobe. It's right here in our forehead. You think too much, you get a headache in your forehead because your frontal lobe is getting tired. Take a break. The frontal lobe has to do with rational thought. Solving problems, talking with people, making good decisions. That's the frontal lobe. So, when you're out, walking in your backyard, and you see this shadow across with the trees, and you get a little shiver, and you start thinking about what could possibly be out there, and your mind starts going a little bit wild. Your frontal lobe is taking a backseat to some other parts. You could be thinking logically, oh, well, I know nothing's out here, so fine. Well, that would be your frontal lobe working. But sometimes with horror, or when we get frightened, the frontal lobe just kind of calms down a little bit. Lets other areas take over. One area is referred to as, it's the amygdala. And this is where we get the emotions of fear. That's where that comes from. Now there's a connective part between the amygdala and the frontal lobe, so that if we get truly terrified, our frontal lobe can calm that down. But sometimes the amygdala overrides it. To kind of give you an idea of the importance of the amygdala, I would tell you about my favorite case study in all of psychology. It's one of the reasons why I want to be a psychologist, or I am a psychologist. I guess I made it. There was this woman who, for various reasons, had to have her amygdala taken out. And psychologists were like, ooh, case study. Well, what can we do with this human? They did 3 things with her. They took her to a haunted house, and that woman didn't give a shit. She walked through, she's like, that's kind of funny. Didn't get scared. No jump scares, anyone came out, and they're like, okay, cool. And they're like, all right, well, maybe that's just how she is with haunted houses. They watched horror films with her. This is the ideal case study, like this is my dream job. But like they watched horror movies with her, no reaction whatsoever. Before she had her amygdala taken out, she had a phobia of snakes, incredibly afraid of snakes. After the amygdala came out, the psychologists were like, let's take her to an exotic pet shop.
Ooh.
And she got to pick up a snake. She got to feel it. She became friends with the snake. She was like, this is my little buddy. Because the amygdala wasn't there anymore. It's not necessary to live, but it is necessary to experience any kind of fear. So when you experience fear, or anger, or anxiety, a lot of that is coming straight from the amygdala, overriding that frontal lobe. So your amygdala goes off, and it says to the rest of your body, we are in a terrifying situation. Let's act. Part of your nervous system is geared for acting in that situation. Your amygdala goes off, and then this one part of your nervous system, called the sympathetic nervous system, says, okay, we're gonna act. We're either gonna beat up this guy, or we're gonna run away really fast. Or you freeze. Have you ever seen BuzzFeed had a little while ago? BuzzFeed had a little while ago an article. It just showed pictures of people's reaction and jump scares in haunted houses, which is a great research on my part, looking at. And people either, they jump, or they look like they're about to go away or run away, or the people who just like freeze up. My favorite, and often my reaction anytime my father and my brother would jump out behind corners as I was growing up, I'd punch. Which, think of the level that like a 6-year-old is at. So, your amygdala turns on. It's like, we need to do something. This is a bad situation. Sympathetic nervous system says, I am here for you. Acts, does something. So say you fight, or you run away. So you get out of that dangerous situation either way. Fortunately, we have this other nervous system, called the parasympathetic nervous system, that calms us down. We're not constantly tense and stressed and on edge as we're about to run away or fight someone. It calms us down. We chill out. Some people, if they have gone through traumatic situations, so they're in a situation where they have incredible fear and their amygdala has just so strongly gone off and their sympathetic nervous system has been running for so long, especially if it's a prolonged traumatic situation, they have retrained their body for their sympathetic nervous system to just stay on. So like folks with PTSD, constantly on edge, hypervigilance, somebody, if they do something unexpected, you can see them react very strongly to that. Their sympathetic nervous system is still turned on, they never relax because it's been overtrained. incredibly exhausting. So this fight or flight response that your sympathetic nervous system does, you have no control over it. Your body just automatically does it to keep you safe. When you play horror video games, game designers are banking on your sympathetic nervous system working. So think about, I was just watching an intro video for Silent Hill PT, just the demo video. It builds up kind of slowly.
Oh yeah.
Just walking through this house, and you're like, all right, what's going on here? I'm playing a horror game, so something weird should be happening pretty soon. Start walking around, creaking noise. All right, that's weird. Keep walking around. Was that better before? I don't know. Keep walking around. It builds up slowly. Gets you more and more tense. One of my more favorites, Resident Evil 7. That was a good one. There'll be periods of calmness, right? Where you're just looking around and you're like, what did I miss last time? Where's the ammo at? I'm about dying here. I need to make some goopy stuff. Something will jump out. And then all of a sudden, your anxiety kicks in and you're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And then you're running away, or you're like, reload, take them out. And so your sympathetic nervous system turns on, and there is what is referred to as arousal theory. Your body gets tense from the sympathetic nervous system turning on. And that's actually a great thing. It makes you do better. When you are tensed up, your body pays attention to what's going on in your environment more. There was, you guys watch Markiplier?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
No.
He played Resident Evil 7. Anyway. And so I started noticing, he'd be like walking through he'd be all very calm, right? And he just like, oh, nothing in this room for me to get. And I'm like, there's like 7 ammos right there, my man. But okay. And then he'd walk out. But then a jump scare would happen, or he'd be in the middle of a fight. And then he's like, oh, as he's running, oh, let me pick this up. I'm gonna do that in a second. Let me pick this up. His sympathetic nervous system, I really want to tell him this, got turned on. And he started noticing his environment more. Because his body's looking for other potential threats. But he's finding these necessary resources that would help him. When you're too relaxed, if you're too relaxed and trying to do something, you don't do your best job. If you've ever had, like, taking a test, if you're too relaxed about a test, you don't study, you don't bring your best to the test, and you might fail. But on the opposite side of that, have you ever been like too stressed out for something? Too anxious about it?
Me every day.
You just went, okay. You're too stressed out, but it's more like the freeze part of it. You're overstimulated. You can't do too much. And so there's kind of like this sweet spot. And game developers really are aiming for the sweet spot. We want to interest and get people turned on enough that they enjoy and find this game stimulating. We don't want them to be too understimulated so that they're bored. And we don't want them to be too overstimulated that they just get frustrated and put the game down. This sweet spot of feeling like it's somewhat challenging and then enjoying. Paul Hellquist, who was the lead designer for BioShock, said early on you have to ask, how much can the player handle at once? We have to find just the right introduction schedule so that when the player is ready for something new, they get it. Balancing that with, whoa, too much at once, I'm frustrated, and I just want to put the game down. Have you ever played a game that was way too frustrating? I like that this guy said Bioshock.
Ninja Gaiden.
Oh my god, Dark Souls.
Screw Dark Souls.
Halo 3 Legendary. Sonic 06
Yeah.
Legendary.
Okay.
Definitely
Alright, I got
Sonic
you.
06.
Okay, you got frustrated at some point. Did you put the game down, or did you just like buckle through it?
Halo 3.
I asked for a refund.
Okay. Okay. There is this one game. It's not a horror game. I'm sorry, but it's gonna make a lot of sense once I pull everything together, okay?
Continuity.
There is, it's gonna come full circle. There is this game. It is designed so that you lose.
Ah.
You cannot win this game. Many of you have played this game. You have never won at it. Sorry. It's Tetris. I have beaten that game, says the man in the front row.
I played the game a lot. I've never beat it. It's a positive. It's designed not to. It's designed.
It's inherently designed not to. Okay. Remember that research, bad research, that people talk about? Violent video games make people more aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, she's already there. You should take my class. That would be better. So, there were all these studies where they're like, okay, play Call of Duty, play whatever, Halo, whatever. And then, so like right before, we'll ask you, how aggressive do you feel right now? And people will be like, I feel okay. Not gonna shoot anybody. And then they play about half an hour of this game, and then afterwards they ask, how aggressive do you feel now? I'm feeling a lot more aggressive. I'm a little pissed off. Okay. Write their research paper, playing video games makes you more aggressive and violent. Then somebody was like, wait a minute. They're more aggressive 20 minutes after playing the game. Are they more aggressive an hour later? 2 weeks later? So they tried that. Come in, play whatever game for half an hour. How aggressive are you feeling? I'm very aggressive. I'm pissed off, man. Bring them back in a couple weeks later. How aggressive are you feeling? Not. I mean, parking was a little difficult, but I got here for this research study. Thank you for the Amazon gift card. And they're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And then they're like, let's compare it with another video game that's not inherently violent. What's the most non-violent game ever made? Pac-Man. The ghosts are after him. It's a horror game. They play Tetris. I bring all of this together.
The very first Kirby game.
Pong would be good. Pong would have been a good one. They chose Tetris. The game where you are meant to lose it. They got just as aggressive playing Tetris. And they're like, there's no blood and gore in Tetris. How is this making you more aggressive and violent? Because it made me angry. You guys play Mario Odyssey?
Yes.
Yeah, I beat that, but I almost threw my Switch like twice.
500 moons. So much.
So many moves.
I just quit like halfway through, like, and now I'm done.
I completed it in a week.
Oh my goodness.
Peach really just...
I hate Peach.
I was like, really? Okay.
I hate Peach. Just from that ending.
But not really aggressive. Made me aggressive because I was frustrated. So there's this whole theory. This is what the whole thing about, if kids see violence, if we got teenage boys and they're watching violent things, it's going to make them violent. Because what you see, you do. Called cultivation theory. You see it, you do it. Monkey see, monkey do. Here's the thing about that. It kind of assumes that everybody is robots. That you just see something, and then you just mindlessly do it. And they're like, wow, Same thing, like people who grow up with violent parents, they'll see their parents do it, and then they'll also be violent when they get to be adults. Well, what if they saw their parent and they were like, wow, what an asshole. I don't want to do that. I want to treat my kid differently. So this theory kind of assumes that you don't have thoughts about things.
Wow.
You see it and you're like, oh, well, what do I think about this? What's my opinion on this? What are my personal beliefs or values? I played Batman Telltale.
Ooh.
I got so upset.
Yes.
Because I had to torture somebody for information. And my only choices were like, do you want to break his leg? Or do you want to break his ribs? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to break anything.
Alright, Mickey Mouse.
Break the legs. Break the back.
Yeah, ribs don't grow back.
Oh, bones heal. Anyway. So, like, in that moment, I was like, I don't know what to do. And then it just chose for me because the timer went out. Because I panicked. Alright, broke his legs. But I didn't, after seeing my player do that, my avatar do that, Batman do that, I wasn't more prone to then break somebody's legs for information. Because I didn't feel... I felt bad about it. I felt actually like physically guilty that I had hurt this poor thug who I really just wanted to like let him make better choices in his life and go on. I didn't finish the game, by the way. Also, it makes a difference even whether or not you're sitting there playing by yourself or you're playing with a group of people. Are you getting more competitive? In which case, that's still a little more different than being actually socially aggressive. What is the context of the violence within the video game? If you see violence, but your character reacts like, oh my god, that was horrible, then that's not the same as, say, a young kid playing a game, and their character wants to do all that violence.
GTA.
Yeah. So, when people just kind of blanketly say, you see violence, you'll do it. They take all of this other stuff, they don't take it into account. So some researchers came to the conclusion that the viewing of some genres, not necessarily horror, just some, has, by some viewers, not necessarily everybody, but some of them, have some effects, maybe, on some of their beliefs. Thank you. So, if you don't just kind of mindlessly consume violent content, well, what does happen? The main question to ask is, how realistic is this to real life? Let me tell you about another study. They were like, okay, researchers were like, okay, so little kids are going to see violent stuff, it's going to make them more violent. Let's get these kids in, and we're going to let them watch Looney Tunes. Because you can't really let them watch the really violent stuff, you know, because there's like ethical guidelines.
Yeah.
So we're like, all right, we'll let them watch Looney Tunes. And they'll drop anvils on each other's heads and bounce back up. And so they watched like a half an hour of violent Looney Tunes. And then the researchers with their little pen and paper to take notes were like, so, would you drop an anvil on someone's head? And the kids were like, that cartoon's not real life, my man. It's not realistic. It's a cartoon. And the kids would say it so nicely. They'd be like, it's a cartoon. It's okay. He didn't really die. These kids were like 5. So they were like, whoa, these 5-year-olds know that the stuff that they're watching isn't necessarily real. And it doesn't
Such
translate.
a revelation.
So, what people are thinking is, the more realistic it becomes to someone's actual life, then maybe that will have some more effects on them. Here's the caveat with that. Video games are becoming really, really graphically realistic, right? Which is great. It's not so great. I'm kind of mad because I just bought a PS4 and now a PS5 are coming out, and I'm kind of like, but anyways.
Sony says it's 3 years off, so you're fine.
Oh, thank you. That calms me down.
Does that make you less aggressive?
So, even with graphics becoming visually realistic, if you play Dark Souls or BioShock or what have you, the story isn't necessarily realistic to your, I'm hoping, to your life, okay? It just goes back to that what if. Let's just imagine what's in the darkness and what might come out of it, or what might happen after death. Let's just think about it and come up with these fantasies and use these astounding graphics, but it's still a fantasy. So, even though it's more realistic, it's not realistic to that person's life. But still, thinking back, even if I were to play some game that just could be pretty realistic to my life, like I could be in this situation someday, that kind of game, it doesn't necessarily have effect on me because it still would matter what is my response to this. I'm in this situation where I would realistically maybe have to choose to be violent to another human being. How do I feel while I'm playing the game? So the thing is, kind of going back, anything we watch, consume, if it interests us, it's going to cause some sort of biological reaction. And if we get overstimulated and we don't feel like we're doing well at the game, or we don't feel good, or we can't win it and it's too frustrating, we get frustrated and we get somewhat aggressive. But then you put the game down, hopefully you walk away and you go on with your life. Or like put the game down, walk away, get a snack. I got 50 more minutes left. Go back and play until however long. So it goes back to that question of, going back to the media, when we watch these violent video games, we play these violent video games, it desensitizes us to all of the violence. So then it's like nothing for someone to be violent towards another person, to shoot up a school, do whatever. But going back to the biology of it, it's way more likely that you don't just get desensitized, stay calm, you have some sort of reaction. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, you get some sort of arousal, and you react to it. And it might make you more likely to react to other visuals of aggression. So really the opposite of desensitization. So I mentioned Freud, or H.P. Lovecraft mentioned Freud about 100 years ago. This other quote that I have by Carl Jung, it's actually a guy who was good buddies with Freud, but they split off because he was like, I don't know if everything's about wanting to have sex with your mother. And Freud was like, block. He also was he was a psychologist, but he was very interested in the unknown, the mysticism of ourselves, spirituality, the darkness that's not just the darkness that we fear, but like the darkness within ourselves. And he said, through our senses, we experience the known, but our intuitions point to things that are unknown and hidden, that by their very nature are secret. If they ever become conscious, they are intentionally kept secret and concealed, for which reason they have been regarded from earliest times as mysterious, uncanny, and deceptive. Again, let me translate it. He's getting at, we go through our lives and we can see, touch, hear things, and take it all in, and we're not afraid so much of the known. We're afraid of the unknown. But there's also a little bit of safety in keeping something unknown. How many of you guys like celebrating Halloween?
Yeah. AKA, W to stay.
I had a conversation with someone and they were like, Halloween's really weird when you sit down and think about it. Which I didn't before this conversation. Boy, it's like no other day of the year would you put skeletons in your yard and it just be cool. And I'm like, you're really right. But it's kind of like death and the unknown that's scary. And so we kind of have whatever just natural, innate apprehension about these sort of things, the unknown. And then we can go and maybe one time of year kind of ease that apprehension by making it fun. And maybe when we make it fun, it makes it a little bit easier to think about and to deal with. And then we kind of put it back into the unknown again after that one day. With horror games, and getting back to why even play it in the first place? Besides, it's kind of fun. But if we use these fantasy games, these things that scare us, because we have these other things, these natural anxieties that we have about life, and the unknown, and the future, and the darkness, and what's beyond, and everything. If you keep that darkness, or that unknown, bottled up a little bit too much, the apprehension and the anxiety just continues to grow. Horror games are kind of like an outlet for it. You get to play it, kind of mess around with this idea of the unknown, the what ifs and the darkness and death and those kind of ideas. But it's in a safe way. It's in a game. And then it kind of eases that apprehension. And then you can go forward after the game, a little less keyed up. And you had a good time doing it. If any of you guys are super interested in the research, I can share that with you. If you would like, we can do question, answer, comment, fun times and dialogue right now.
Yeah.
I am somewhat hard of hearing, so if you would like to use that microphone, I would like to hear the things that you have to say. And just to throw it up here, if you guys are interested in these kind of things, I do other con panels. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm talking about Tomb Raider. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Anybody? You mean Falling Simulator?
But if you can't make it to that one, you can check out my other stuff. I have the videos on superpsych.com. And if you want, you can take, I got a coupon here, I got a course coming out. So then, she left, but she would have been my ideal student. But if you want to take an online course about psychology and learn more about this stuff, I got a promo code for you. What do you got?
Okay, sorry. You mentioned Markiplier, and that kind of made me think of what I know him for, the Five Nights at Freddy's series.
Oh, okay.
That's a series you can't run and you can't fight, so you're kind of stuck in that mode. And how do you think that affects you, biologically wise?
So, what I use Five Nights at Freddy for, actually, I teach a psychology of video games course. And I talk about Five Nights at Freddy for the learning thing. So the thing about Five Nights at Freddy, right, is that you don't get in your rules. So you kind of get some rules, but you learn along the way. So you make a mistake and get punished for it. And then, all right, you try something else, you don't get punished for it. It kind of simulates little kids. Before you can explain things to them, you either have to reward them for good behavior or punish them for bad behavior, whatever that is. And that's just the amount that they can learn something from. So I actually use Five Nights at Freddy to just teach learning theory, which often includes just seeing people do violence, and therefore you do violence.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you.
So this turned out to be a much different panel than I thought it would be.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not a bad thing. I came in with a question I love Resident Evil. I have played every single one, and it's getting better. But my main question is, I see a lot that the original Resident Evil, the first zombie scene, is regarded as the scariest in gaming. And maybe I'm just desensitized, but I don't think I've ever really found it scary. So I was kind of hoping this panel would explain why we fear such things, especially when it can't hurt us.
So here's my personal opinion based on what I've read on this kind of stuff, is that a lot of the scariness has to come through the apprehension. So like I've watched a lot of horror movies that are really like in your face, here's some blood and someone's running off, their head just got chopped off and running. And to me it's not scary because there was no apprehension building. It's very, very graphic. But then I'll watch other like suspense movies where I don't actually see any gore, but the storytelling, that's what H.P. Lovecraft got to, like the whispers in the corner and just walking through the woods at night. It's not so much about the graphics, it's about the setting. And then like the mind place that it puts you in of what could be behind that corner. It might be really a pixelated corner, but you start thinking about the what ifs and then something comes out at you.
So it's more the sense of ominous instead of fear factor.
Absolutely.
So I have a habit of every October I just play scary video games because I hate myself, or love myself, take a pic. Anyways, I actually gave myself a fear of goats through one of them.
What, can you say that one more time?
I was playing the Count Lucanor, and the first time you go past the goats, everything's fine. I was like, oh, hey, look, everything's safe and peaceful. And then you go back past the goats, and they stand up, and now I have a fear of goats. And I was going to ask, what's your opinion on games taking things that are normally very mundane, case in point, goats, or just like, oh, that's a friendly cat. Okay, it's smiling now. I'm not feeling comfortable anymore. And like giving you an actual new fear of something that like you keep with you after the game. Case in point, I get really nervous around goats because I'm like, I know it's not going to stand up, but I'm having that flashback.
So from like a psychologist point of view, that's really cool. I'm sorry. But yeah, so it's like what actually happens is you just train your body, you see the stimulus, go, and then fear, go, fear, go, fear. And
that's
then
going to stand up and run after me again.
And then your body has just learned that. It's like every time I see this, I should have this reaction. And so now you see goats, and you're like, the frontal lobe is fine. It's like, I know it's not going to stand up. Unless you feel like a trick goat someday. Like, oh my god, that's going to be so bad for you.
I mean, they're pretty sneaky looking.
Yeah. So the frontal lobe is working, but the amygdala has taken over. It's like, listen, I have seen these goats before, and I know to go off.
Hey, yeah, I stood up earlier and then I got scared and then I came back because, but nobody judges here anyways. This is about fear. I have been diagnosed with schizoaffective.
Okay.
And so I have hallucinations and delusions and stuff. And my question, since you're in psychology, is what is going on in my brain that causes me to fear things that aren't there? Like, what brings those about?
So now, just for clarification, is your question what causes these hallucinations, or is your question why am I afraid of these hallucinations?
The fear. Why am I afraid of?
You know, I don't really think that the fear of the hallucinations is the abnormal part.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to get into like what you actually hallucinate, but if I saw something that wasn't there and the content of it was scary, I would be afraid. That part to me is not abnormal. Like, as if there's no difference to me between like if a snake just came into this room and I actually was afraid, and if I just hallucinated it, I still would be afraid.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is it's like, what is it that's in my brain that makes fear real to me? Like, other people, they think of something scary and it's like, oh, that's a thought. Whereas me, I get paranoid. I'm like, oh crap, maybe I really do need to worry about this thing that is talking to me and all that.
So, as a caveat, I'm not a specialist in schizoaffective. Sorry. But what it sounds like is maybe the amygdala is just working a little overtime with you. And so you see these things, we get afraid of things. What turns on the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system is seeing something in our environment. Something pops out, we see it. We hear scary music in a movie and we're like, oh, that guy's about to get it. Like you know it through what you're taking in through your surroundings. And a hallucination is just your senses working, thinking that something is there, it just not actually is. But it's just as real as if you're actually seeing it or hearing it, what have you. So your body reacts the same.
Because it's kind of like, I was watching Harry Potter the other day and I thought about Dumbledore's quote, it's all in your head. That doesn't mean it isn't real.
Exactly. I think that's kind of what, I wasn't thinking that a second ago, but yeah, I think so. Just because it's just a hallucination. If I had to, like, it would make sense to still be afraid of different things.
Yeah.
So for games, I usually notice like there's 3 ways of dealing with the unknown. You can either fight it and actually defeat it, you can fight it and you're ineffectual, or you can run away. From a psychology standpoint, which of those is more terrifying and why?
So, this is my personal opinion, and it kind of goes back to H.P. Lovecraft being incredibly racist. He had a fear of the unknown, and so instead of finding out other people's experiences, getting to know people, what have you, he ran away. So if you run away, the unknown is always unknown, and so it's prolonged. I kind of think, and I say this knowing that I'm being a hypocrite about it, but like, if you can find out what's actually behind the curtain, what's in the dark, it might be truly terrifying, but at least then you can do something with it.
I'm short. So have you ever heard of a game called Collat?
No.
Bless you.
Okay, well it's, I don't feel like explaining it because the backstory is really complicated, no time for that, but for fear, I mean there are these demon things that are after you, but only in certain parts. You'll know when it's coming and that's still really freaky, but most of the fear just comes from complete and total isolation. You're out in the Siberian wilderness, no people for miles. It's not like, you know, Evil Within where there used to be people here, or Bioshock where they've all gone insane. There's just no one, there never was anyone. That's what most of the fear relies on, is just you're alone.
Because we're so, like, not only do we have like this interest in the unknown, but like that's what we do. That's what makes us so anxious as humans, because we're so imaginative and we start thinking about the what ifs and things. Almost like our own minds are the scariest thing. And maybe like in isolation when we don't see something, we just let our minds run wild.
So I've noticed that a lot of horror games kind of struggle to kind of have that similar fear factor after you've already experienced it, or if you're replaying the game. Are there any like psychological phenomena or like game development tricks that you've noticed people use to kind of extend that duration where you can be scared?
Oh, it's like from a game developer's standpoint? Yeah, so the thing is like, if you replay a game, you know what's about to happen. So, the idea is always, I would think for any game, is to keep the player interested. And if it's the same thing over and over, then you get bored. That stimulation goes down, that arousal goes down. So they have to come up with, all right, they've already solved this puzzle, or they already had to defeat this boss that's similar. Let's not throw that at them again.
Thank you.
Hey, so, question. In your opinion, what is the best horror game series to be able to tap and maximize into the human fear factor?
It was therapeutic.
Yeah, what are you guys' opinions? Like, Island Hill. Did you say Island Hill? Silent Hill. Okay, see, I told you guys. Alright. I just, like, when thinking of an answer to that question, I just thought of my favorite. And I really liked Outlast a lot.
1, 2, or both?
not two. I really like Outlast and Whistleblower. Outlast 2 kind of just, it made me mad. Like, it wasn't the violence that made me aggressive, it was the ending. And then I was like, what? Similar to Infinity War.
So I'm kind of curious about music in horror games. Is there some kind of inherent property of the music that they're leveraging to make you fearful, or have we just developed and conditioned over time a language of fear in music?
I really think that it is that we have developed it culturally. That we started off with movies, whoever, like when the early horror movies that were being made, they had those what we now consider eerie sound effects and things. That now it has just kind of trained us. And it would be really hard to research it. I guess you would have to get like a baby who's never, or like a young kid who's never heard those sound effects before, and see if just hearing that makes them apprehensive. That would be the research to prove whether or not it's innate or learned. But kind of at this point, we just took like any adult, we've already just been so socially conditioned that like you hear that speak, or it's like certain music, like slower music, builds up your apprehension. There's actually a series on Netflix called Brain Games, and in one of the episodes, like 2 or 3, very early on it, they talk about this. They show a clip of someone's jogging through a neighborhood and someone's chopping wood, and they play like really nice music, birds are all chipper and it's like really cool, and they're like, oh, what a nice clip. Then they show the same clip again, but it's the eerie music, and then you see the guy chop the wood, and you're like, oh, the girl joggers get it. Like, it's the same thing, it's just the music that changed.
And also remember the industrial, sounds of 2 and 3.
They look at me and immediately go.
Yeah, that's a prime example of us being conditioned by everyday sound combined together.
Well, I mean, and I do think that as a caveat, I think if we can use some kind of sound that is kind of unknown, that's foreign, you can leverage that. Like, if you've ever looked into like Dada art and their music, they use absolutely bizarre instruments. I would imagine that probably would elicit fear even in a culture that hasn't been indoctrinated, because they've never heard anything even similar to it. But I think that you could also get rid of that by conditioning.
My friend said, why don't you count them all?
Alright, so as video gaming gets more and more advanced with more and more peripherals, like the VR headset. An example would be, I work with a game truck, and we have the VR headset, and a lot of people haven't ever done VR before, so they get their first try with that. We have this game where you go down in a shark cage to investigate a submarine crash, and there's a shark in the movie, and a lot of people, we have seen people scramble on their seat. So I guess what my question would be is, do you think that technology in video gaming is going to, or how do you think that technology in video gaming is going to affect the horror genre? And how we go into it?
So, because of like how you were just saying, like, because it's so immersive, it kind of goes back to the hallucination thing. It doesn't matter that it's not real. The primal part of your brain goes off and acts as though it was real, even though the frontal lobe's like, you're fine. So I think probably that there will be more like a code or guidelines on what can be presented in a horror game in VR, so that people aren't accidentally hurting themselves.
Yeah, I have to, as a legal requirement, if anyone wants to play any of our scary games, I have to actually ask them, are you prone to heart attacks before they put the VR headset on?
Yeah, that makes sense. But this is kind of cool. There's how I was talking about people with PTSD, or say like with phobias especially. There's research even done to see if VR headsets can be used to help with phobias and can be used as a therapeutic technique. So like before, let's say I have somebody who has a fear of elevators. One technique to help them with that phobia is to just make them ride an elevator. Because the sympathetic nervous system, being anxious, your body can only take it for so long. And then you will eventually tire out. And then your other system will kick in, you'll calm down. Some people have these phobias that maybe are unrealistic, in which case we can't just put them in that situation. So maybe put them in VR. And then they just have to stay in it until eventually their anxiety dissipates, their body just calms down. So on one hand, I think there will be more guidelines and codes on what can be used. On the other hand, I'm more familiar with how it's actually being used as a therapeutic technique, which I think is pretty cool.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, quick question, because I'm just down. Did you cover anything as far as studies of fear in other primates and other animals like dogs, cats, and how that's maybe, they respond to video games, watching and whatnot?
They didn't, but can I tell you a personal story? I was watching XFiles with my cat. And there's this one episode that has a lot of snakes on it. And Charles Xavier got really anxious. He saw the snakes on the screen and he was like, and then he like scattered underneath the bed. So, I haven't read any of the studies or anything, but just seeing that, and like if you see a cat can't even think, oh, that's not there, it's on TV. They just see this thing that they have this instinct to be afraid of, and it was real enough for him to have that reaction.
Can I add something onto that?
Yeah.
If you're a way that something that really takes the edge off any horror game is when your cat starts trying to catch the things on the screen.
Yeah.
He did that with Lego Batman. Wait, what cat? My other cat really likes watching Batman the animated series. She likes the explosions.
Is your cat Mr. Torg by any chance?
I get it.
I get it. Thank you. Torg!
What do you got for me?
I've noticed that sometimes with the horror things that's happening to the character, and some people can disassociate themselves that this is just happening to the character, but the way to alleviate, sometimes the horror game will actually attack the person themselves, like Eternal Darkness. When your sanity is low, you basically start to hallucinate things. And it can go beyond from just what's happening in the game to it causing your save file to delete, or it's just an illusion.
Okay. But you think it in the moment.
Sometimes the volume will look like the volume's turned down on your own TV.
Oh yeah, I remember this game.
That's genius on the part of the game developer, though.
One time, halfway through the game just stops and says that it'll be continued in this next game, and then it just goes back to the game itself, like.
So they're trying to simulate you having hallucinations. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's getting meta, like in Undertale, so there's some stuff like that in there. There's this like visual graphic novel that it's got like anime schoolgirls in it, and it starts going down. It starts innocent enough, but then things start getting weird, like glitches in the Matrix and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
But,
do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, or rather confess about Eternal Darkness. And I'm not ashamed to say I threw a shoe at the screen when I thought there was a real cockroach.
Yeah, that happens.
It was not real, but I was so in it that I was just, My TV was fine, but I was very immersive.
Was your shoe okay?
It's sad
It was a
that
flip-flop, it was a-
Nintendo basically owned the sanity thing that they created, and they're not probably going to use it again. So.
Wait, so wait, Nintendo actually made Eternal Darkness?
No, they have the patents, the license on the sanity effects that you sort through.
Of course they do.
Silicon Knights try to make a pseudo-spiritual successor to it, but their Kickstarter.
Make a game where you actually get rejected by Peach.
Just want to say, Metal Gear was doing hallucinations first when he played back on.
Let me get your question, and we'll do that one last real quick, so then we can.
Okay. Kind of related. The most publicly noted in Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which is sort of a spin-off title, but and I guess some of the others sort of kind of do that or try to, but there are bits in that game where they're explicitly trying to do some basic analysis of the player to tailor specific parts of the story or experience to them, to freak them out or get a bigger emotional reaction out of them. Do you think that's actually a possibility with a medium like this to be effective?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the goal with anything where you want the person to stay engaged. And the whole point with video game developers is we want to make a game where you continue to play. You finish the game, and then you buy our sequel. That's their motivation. So they look at this research about, okay, what keeps people engaged? And people like it when they're not bored. But that can differ from individual to individual. So if they can design the game so that it changes a little bit based on the individual to keep you at that sweet spot of stimulation, then they're engaging each individual but differently. So it's kind of like the most flexible game. So yeah, I think that's kind of the goal for them. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciated all of the questions and comments.